So the history of Knoxville is really, really interesting, but where it all began and how it happened, well, you have to go to someone who's an expert. And sure enough, we found an expert right here. We're at the James White Fort, which is located in Knoxville. But tell us your name and where you're working at, and your position, and tell us kind of the background of Knoxville. How did it become? It really wasn't called Knoxville at first, right?
Well, I'm Sam Maynard. I'm the executive director here at James White's Fort. This is the beginning of the city of Knoxville, and it all started as a city in 1791, but this started as a settlement in 1786. James White was a captain in the Revolutionary War, and he got a land grab act, which was what it was called back in those days. Now, this whole area was from the Mississippi to the Atlantic was North Carolina territory.
Oh, wow.
So he came and settled this area with that land grab of 1,000 acres and built this two-story log cabin, which we're sitting next to, and then the rest of the buildings in 2 years later. It was called a fort at that time for protection against a lot of the wild animals that were around here. Not so much the Indians,
right?
Because he spoke the Cherokee language, and he made negotiations with the Indians, especially the Treaty of the Holston, which was held here by the 46 Indian chiefs at that time in the 1780s and 90s.
So two rivers, that's what starts Tennessee. So tell us about the rivers and the confluence here.
Around about 2 miles from this location right here is the Holston River, which comes out of Virginia. Then the French Broad River comes out of North Carolina, and it comes to a point called the Forks of the River, which we all know that. And it's the beginning of the Tennessee River, which flows all the way into the Mississippi, which goes into the Gulf of Mexico. This was their highway back in those days.
Right.
But flatboats, people on those territories of that area would discover more areas on down the river system, and they would stop here in the flatboats and trade out. They would stay in the cabins that he had built, extra cabins, which were 3 of them, overnight, and with their families, and he'd trade out for pieces of fabric, seeds, iron goods, domestic animals, gunpowder, such as things as that right there before they went on down the river system. But he gave them a place to stay. And this is also an outpost for hunters, trappers, that sort of a thing that happened back in those days. That was just one like a Davy Crockett cabin.
Interesting. So there's a lot of different cabins that are right here. So tell me how many structures are here.
We have 8 structures. We have the main house, which is 2-story, out of logs.
Which is what we're actually here because it's raining, and these are the actual buildings themselves. They're not reproductions.
Right. These are the actual logs from the original building built over 200 years ago. Some of them had to be replaced. Of course, wood does deteriorate. We had to replace some of those, but these are the main ones. This is a 2-story log cabin, as I said, right here, with the bedroom upstairs. Bedroom, not bedrooms.
Oh, wow.
And the other side is the dog trot right here. Then we have the kitchen wing, which kitchens were always separate from the main house in those days because it always had a fire going and the heat.
Right.
And if it did catch on fire, basically you could get that out pretty quickly.
So, and that's where we're at. And tell us about the history of the name, how Knoxville became Knoxville and it didn't end up being Bluentville maybe or something.
Well, in 1786, he did move into this cabin right here, the 2-story cabin, and they built the other cabins 2 years later. So in 1791 came around with John Sevier, the first governor of Tennessee, William Blount, the governor of the territory, sanctioned by George Washington, Francis Alexander Ramsey, which is part of the Ramsey House at the Forks of the River. They were all friends. They decided they want to converse him to make a city, a little settlement here. So on October the 3rd, 1791, James sold all the property, which is downtown Knoxville right now, in 64 different lots. 1 through 64 was put on a paper in a hat. It was drawn out by all the men for $8 a lot. The city of Knoxville began in 1791. Now, if you want to know a little bit more history, 5 years later, in 1796, we became the 16th state of the Union, with Blunt Mansion been built at that time, and an old tavern where our towers are, the First Tennessee Tower and the BB&T Tower is. They've made the settlement to decide, well, we're becoming a state. It was first called Tennessee, but they changed it to Tennessee.
Right.
So we're the 16th state of the Union, all formed with help from James White, William Blount, John Spear.
So if they wanted to find out more about this, do you have a website they can go to? And what's your physical location if they were trying to find it?
We're at near the Tennessee River. We're basically a block away from Blunt Mansion. It's over the bridge. We're right at near the downtown area. It's walking distance, maybe 8 minutes by walking. We're right across the street from the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. It's just a great location, and it provides us, come and see us. We're at the beginning of the city of Knoxville and the start of the state of Tennessee.